Hello creators, it's Melissa from Melissa's Creations, and today I have a very special card for you and I'm really excited about it. For this video we are hopping with the creators blog hop, and this month's theme is dads and grads. I've decided to make my dad a Father's Day card, and I wanted to make a special card for him because he's a special person. So I came up with this. It was inspired by a video I saw from another crafter with this technique here to cut out the lighthouse and then have a circle behind it here. And then you have a very beautiful, vibrant, colorful background. And I just think it really makes that lighthouse pop, and it's so beautiful. So I'm really excited to show you how I made this card. Let's get started. This card actually uses a full sheet of Whisper white cardstock. This is the thick cardstock, so it's nice and heavy. It's perfect to get that watercolor background as well if you don't have watercolor paper on hand. So the first thing I'm gonna do is cut my card base, and that is 5.5 by 8.5. So I'm just gonna chop that in half, and we're gonna score it in the middle at 4.25. Okay, so there's our card base. I'm going to set that aside to the very end. And now with the other half of that cardstock, I'm going to cut two pieces. So we're going to do 5 this way. I'm just going to chop all this side bit off. And then I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to cut it at 3 3/4. And actually the second piece can be a little bit smaller. I'm actually going to cut it right at that 3.5 mark. And then I'm going to trim it down to 4 3/4. So we're going to start with our bottom piece so that we can color it and it can have a little bit of time to dry while we work on the other one. You're going to want to get an aqua painter and the colors that you want to use. For this card, you can see purple and kind of like a pinky red and then like an orangey yellow. And I only used 3 different colors, and those are Night of Navy, Poppy Parade, and Crushed Curry. So I brought in a piece of scratch paper here. I have my cardstock, my aqua painter, and my ink pads. I'm going to start with the Crushed Curry. I like to always start lightest and then go to darkest. So you can see that I've already been playing around. I've got ink all over my finger. It is so funny. So I'm going to start by squeezing this ink pad so that I can get some ink on the top here. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to squeeze your ink pad, and you don't have a re-inker, you can just take a block and you can pick up that ink by dabbing it on top, and you can do the same technique using that method. But I am just fine getting all messy and putting that ink in the top. So I'm just going to pick all that up, and I'm just going to start swiping all the way across and down. I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way. Now we're not going to see all of this background. You're really just going to see this circle part here, but I really want to make sure that I get a little bit of each color. So I'm actually going to do a thinner band of the red. I'm squeezing a little bit more water into my cap so that I can get the rest of this surface a little more wet so that the ink flows a little better. All right, so that's good for the yellow. Let's go into the red. And I do have a little bit. Let's squeeze a little bit more. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so squeezing a little bit more of that water out of the pen into the cap. Okay, pick some of that up. Get some more water. You really want to get this nice and wet. And then I'm going to go back over the yellow a little bit to blend that in, to try and get an orangey tone. Now you don't want to get your paper too wet, or else it will start to kind of pill and not look very good. So just be aware of how much water you're getting on there. All right, so I'm going to let that go there for a minute. We're going to jump into our Night of Navy. I've got some water droplets in the cap there, so let's use some of that up. I'm going to start from the bottom on this piece. And I kind of like the streaky look. It kind of reminds me more of a sunset. So just go ahead and mix until you feel that it is right for you. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to set that aside to let that dry. So the products we're using today, I have the new Cling Stamp Set Sailing Home. We're using this awesome lighthouse image here, and I'm also using the sentiment, "You are my true north." I really like that, especially for a Father's Day card. I'm also using the coordinating smooth sailing dies, and I'm using the lighthouse die from this set. And I'm also using the largest circle from the Layering Circles Framelits dies. I'm bringing back in that piece of cardstock that we cut that measures 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And I'm going to mount up my lighthouse onto an acrylic block. And the D size block just barely works for this. So I'm going to mount this up very carefully so that I can get all of the pieces on there at an angle just like that. And I'm going to be stamping that in the Night of Navy. And you want to stamp it where you want it to be on your card. So it's basically right in the middle on my card here. So I'm going to stamp it in the same place. Try and get it as straight as you can up and down. Perfect. While I have my ink out, I am going to get out my sentiment. We're going to stamp that right now as well. Now, before I switch out my lighthouse for my sentiment, I'm going to get the extra ink off of my stamp, and I want to show you something really cool. I just got this and I am in love. This is the chamois, the Stampin' Chamois, and all you do, it does get very messy, however, you just stamp it off a couple times on a piece of scratch paper and then stamp it on your chamois, and it is completely dry. I mean, there's not any kind of residue or anything. It stamps totally dry after that. Love this thing so much. Cannot recommend it enough. All right, so now let's get our sentiment mounted up here. You are my true north. And again, in that Night of Navy, we're just going to center that down here. All right, so this is where the magic is going to happen. I have my die for my lighthouse, and I have the largest circle, and we're going to be putting those on here and cutting it out. Now, we're not going to cut out completely on both of them. We're just going to cut out a portion. So you're going to bring in the Big Shot or any die cutting machine that you have. Let's move this out of the way for a moment. Roll this out. Okay, so I'm going to put my image down and put my lighthouse die on top. I'm going to line it up. Okay, so I have it lined up where I want it. Now I'm not going to put the plate on top of the entire thing. I'm just going to put the plate so that it lines up with the bottom of the lighthouse portion here, right where it hits the waves or the rocks, whatever those are. So I'm just going to line it up right like this. And actually maybe even a little higher, just right there. I'm going to gently scoot it into the machine until it catches and roll it through. So by doing that, the lighthouse is only cut out at the top. You can see that it didn't cut the bottom portion, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so once you have that portion cut, you're going to put your circle framelit down on top, and I'm just leaving a little tiny bit of space from the top of the lighthouse to the bottom edge here of this circle framelit. I'm centering it on the page, so I have the same amount of space on this side and this side. And you don't have to be too concerned with what's happening at the bottom because we're gonna do a little bit of trimming on that in just a minute. Now, again, you don't want to cut all the way down. So I'm going to slide my plate back in just to the bottom of those cut marks where we cut our lighthouse sides here and here. So you're going to scooch it into your machine until it catches and then roll it through. Okay, so there is the start, and we're going to trim it up in just a minute. bringing back in our trimmer and taking this piece here, what you want to do is cut from the bottom cut of the circle across to where the bottom cut of the lighthouse piece is. So I'm going to line that up in my Stampin' trimmer, and I'm just eyeballing where those cuts are. So I'm going to pick up my ruler, slide my trimmer up a little bit, and just go a little bit at a time. You can always cut a little bit more. I think that's probably good right there. So I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom part here. Okay, a little bit more this way, a little more that way. There we go. And now gently, and if you need to take some scissors to get it really nice and sharp, you can do that. But look at that, it just comes right out. All right, now that my background has had a chance to dry just a little, I'm going to bring back in one of these stamps. I'm going to actually use the birds. So we're going to grab the birds, mount those up on our block, and again, we're going to use Night of Navy for those. So just stamp a few, and then you'll be able to kind of position it slightly where you want it to go. All right, so I have a few dimensionals here. So what we're gonna do is, I know for sure they need to go on the lighthouse. I'm gonna put a couple down here. And you wanna make sure that you don't put them too far out. So here's about the size that we have to work with. So don't put them any farther than 1/4 of an inch from the edge of this piece, and you'll be just fine. Now it's time to get that stuck down to our card base. So here's the card base I cut earlier. I'm just going to fold it in half and give that score line a crease. And I find that the best way to glue this down, especially if it's still a little wet or if it's gone through to the back, use your liquid adhesive, because you'll get a nice placement. It'll stick really well, and you'll have a little bit of time to move it around if you need to, if it's not exactly in the middle. So I'm just going to put a little bit on the back there and stick it right on the front. Now the last step is to take some of this gorgeous Nature's Twine. We're going to use the crumb cake because it looks similar to what you would see on a sailboat. And this part might take a little bit of time to get right, but it's really worth it. And I think that this knot on the front is really beautiful on this card. It kind of replicates this knot here. Now there might be an easier way to do it than the way I'm going to show you, but not knowing how to tie that, I just kind of looked at the picture and threw it together. So I'm going to show you the way that I did it. And if you have a resource that shows you a better way, let me know. All right, so I want to double it up so I have 4 strands on each side. So what I'm going to do is make a decent sized loop, and you will have a little bit of waste on this. You can try to do it smaller, but it will be a little harder to hold on to. So I'm going to double it up like this, and then double it up again like that. So this is pretty small, so you might want to go a little bit bigger if you have trouble with small bows and things. I'm going to trim that off. I'm going to do another piece that same length. And don't worry about this kind of frayed edge here. We're going to take care of that at the end. So now I have 2 pieces the same length. So I'm going to fold them in half. I'm going to separate them. And I'm going to set that one down for a second. So I have this one folded in half. I'm going to fold it in half again. I'm not going to cut this end yet. We're going to do that at the end. So what I'm doing is I'm making a loop. So I've got a loop here, my ends are down here, and the loop I will be cutting is there. So I've got that one. I'm going to do the same thing with this. Now trying to keep that in place. You could probably set it down and put your scissors on top of it, but I think for me that might be asking for disaster. So I'm just going to use my other 2 fingers here to do the same thing. Okay, so now that I have that, what I'm going to do is insert one of them through the other. So I'm going to take this one and insert it here like this. So now you have those loops going in together. Now the trick is you want some of the tails underneath a loop and some of the tails on top of the loop. So I'm going to take these two ends and thread them through that loop very carefully. Okay, there's one, got it through. I'm going to take these tails and might want a helper if you're lucky enough to have a helper on hand. Let's try this again. Okay, very carefully without letting the middle part go. There we go. All right, I think we've got it. So now you have there the makings of a knot. So I'm not going to tighten it all the way. I'm going to tighten it just a skosh. And I want to try to keep these tails flat. So I'm going to kind of move them around until they're all laying as flat as they can. Just tighten a little tiny bit more. Maybe we need to, let's see. Yeah, I think that'll be fine once we get the glue dot on it. All right, so now I'm going to pinch the knot. I'm going to take my scissors and trim that off there. Cut those little loops there. Now we can trim off those whiskers. I'm just going to kind of line them up and little chopping motions like you're cutting hair, if you've ever cut hair before. I have not, but actually I have. I was about 5 and I cut off my neighbor's bangs. Hey, she wanted it, you know? It was all the rage. All right, do a little bit more on that end. There we go. And I'm gonna grab, so now it should sit by itself. I'm gonna grab my glue dots and we're gonna put 2 on here. So I'm gonna just poke it right down there. So it's kind of under the knot and it's capturing some of these whiskers so that they lay flat. So we're gonna pick that one up and I'm gonna put another one on the other side. Again, so it captures some of the knot and those whiskers. Pick it up with my scissors. Okay. Now I'm spreading my scissors, capturing a little bit of each one of those glue dots so that it's really easy to just stick down. We're gonna put that right in the middle, just like that. And there we are, creators. There is our beautiful Father's Day card using the Sailing Home bundle with those coordinating smooth sailing dies. I really hope that you enjoyed this project today. If you did, please be sure to give the video a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this project today. Don't forget to go to the coordinating blog post, which is linked in the description box below, and you can hop along to all of the other wonderfully talented demonstrators from around the world who are participating in this month's blog hop. You'll get loads of inspiration for dads and grads alike. You can follow me on the web at melissascreations.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/MKre8tions. I'm also on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest with the handle @MKre8tions. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!